in that sector. Did you ever feel at any point you had to compromise with your principles, even when you left as telecom minister?
Not in the slightest, because I always knew, firstly, everybody knew you can put pressure, but I'm deaf. So I don't hear the pressure.
Were those above you deaf as well?
No, absolutely. That is the crux of the matter, Sonia, which you have asked. Because Mr. Bajpayee was my shield, because Mr. Ramnath Goenka was my shield, they would never allow any pressure to work. Who can put pressure? I'd only have to mention it to Mr. Bajpayee. And do you know the authority of Mr. Bajpayee? If some minister was doing something wrong, all that Atalji will do will be to raise his eyebrows like this, so the fellow will cower.
But Mr. Shourie, that's odd, because you know that actually I think the biggest blot, as you would say, on Mr. Vajpayee's regime at that time was allegations of his son-in-law being involved in many business deals, etc. at that time, all the questions of who runs the Prime Minister's office. So isn't that a different Mr. Vajpayee than the one you talk about today as well, and in governance?
I must confess to you, I know Mr. Ranjan Bhattacharya. I knew him only marginally then, but I know him very well now. At no stage, either in any case involving disinvestment or in any case involving telecom, ever did anybody like Ranjan Bhattacharya or anyone of Mr. Brijesh Mishra ever speak to me. It was only I who went to Mr. Brijesh Mishra from time to time to say, sir, here is a roadblock, can you please talk to the minister or the civil servant concerned.
Actually, Mr. Shourie, your life has been fascinating, and I was always interested in how you made that switch from journalism to politics. But I have someone to ask you a question who knows you very well. She's a journalist as well. Nalini Singh, your sister, would like to ask you a question.
My question to you is, you have said how much you've learned from Adit and from Anita and from our parents. Even the fact that from our parents, even though, and it's very interesting for me that, our mother was such a God-fearing, religious person who enjoyed the rituals of a large family. And you, at some stage, I don't know when, but you were an agnostic or a non-believer, and, and then the two of you were the closest relationship in the whole family. I mean, all of us are very close, were very close.
Well, I'm sure we could all write another book about that. But interesting incident. I'll tie up Indian Express and mother. You see, actually, when we were little children, and I was studying in modern school, and we had a great principal, Mr. M.N. Kapoor, and Swami Chinmayanand, as a young man, had just started coming to Delhi. So he would give lectures in one of the compounds in the school. So we were chokras in the boarding house. So we would be taken to fill up the front rows. And Swami Chinmayanand was a brilliant speaker, and he would always introduce his stories with anecdotes of Gupta ji. So now Gupta ji is walking on the banks of the Ganges, and the Ganges is in flood in Rishikesh, and suddenly he trips and falls into the Ganges. It's a flood, and he doesn't know how to swim, and he's trying to keep his head above water, and suddenly his hand catches on to something, and he notices that it's a silver stick. And now he's doubly trying to save his life and the silver stick, but the flood is such that his hand loosens and he loses the stick. And he starts shouting, "Arey, meri chandi ki soti chali gayi." It was not his stick, but for 1 minute it was with him, and he said chandi. So what happened was, I was dismissed from the Indian Express. So I drove my car back in 11 o'clock. Because there was a dismissal notice. I came home, I rang the bell. We used to stay with our parents, and my mother opened the door and she looked at me and she said, "Kaka kyu hai? What has happened?" So I said, "Mummy, unhone to dismiss hi karta hai." It took her 1 second and she said, "Arun, ye to chandi di soti nikli." It turned out to be so it immediately changed the situation.
Whole perspective, how you look at it. But Arun, I mean, tell us, so many young people, I think, don't know about your days as a journalist, and those were heady, crusading times. In fact, I think Shekhar is going to join us a little bit to talk about that. But just relive for us the time when you brought down a Maharashtra Chief Minister, and when you brought down, in a way, the Rajiv government as well, and Bofors. You got personal threats. The newspaper at one time, I think 300 cases were lodged against the Indian Express.
Yes.
You were never frightened at all?
No, one day I was terribly frightened. I mean, what happened was that during this Bofors business, a contrivance. Delhi edition has to be closed because there is a strike. We had some 900 employees. 750 would come to Sundarnagar flat of Ramnaji, sign the register every day. I led them in a procession into the Indian Express building, and these congresspersons and the Delhi police, they surrounded the building, cut off the water, cut off the electricity, and I had these 400-500 persons, no food, no water, but we brought out the edition, we printed it, and but now how to distribute it in the city? So I said, we have made the point and now we must go home. This is about 3 in the morning. The window panes had been broken by these ruffians who had been hired. It was a terrible night. When I reached home and I lay down, I then realized that I was shaking. In journalism, that's a night I have not forgotten.
Let me go across, as we talk about Indian Express, so from one current editor to a former editor. Shekhar, go ahead and ask your questions to Arun Shourie. I know you have differences as well, but go ahead and ask him what you'd like today. As I said, from someone who learnt under him as well.
Well, not just worked under him. I think I owe most of what I've made of my life and career to him. He is my guru. I owe him an eternal debt of gratitude, not just for many other things, but specifically for one thing. He sent me to cover the Northeast, which was then the most sensitive news assignment in the country at the age of 23 years and 4 months. Which other editor would ever do this? Even I, who has learned from Arun, would be scared of doing something like that.
I'll tell you how I began to admire this young boy. An aunt of mine, my mother's younger sister, got cancer. And we had to treat her at the PGI in Chandigarh. And I had taken her to Chandigarh. There was a Chandigarh edition. Naturally, I turned to the reporter who was in Chandigarh to help us, to go to contact the doctors and so on. And wherever I went, Shekhar was there with his fleet shoes. He is everywhere. And I remember the great opposition of the senior editors at that time, that how can you just send a novice? Arey Baba, I've seen his work. He is such an independent fellow. You send him to Northeast and see what happens. And exactly that happened. He was everywhere in the Northeast. He brought Northeast to India.
Well, that's a great compliment, Shekhar. But go ahead. What would you like to ask Mr. Shourie today?
Arun, one thing that, we have many conversations, but I never get quite to ask you sort of as sharply as this. Tell me the big surprise that you found when you entered public life, the big positive surprise and the big disillusionment.
I think the biggest positive, but maybe it was not a surprise, but because I got to know him much better, the positive thing was Mr. Bajpayee. And on his word, you could trust, you could take him at face value at his word. Of course, you must be very careful that when he speaks, he will often speak in a half sentence and complete the sentence 2 days later, and you better be careful of that. But we knew that he would back us ever. If you permit me, I'll give you one instance. I had a secretary. There was some disinvestment matter, and the contender was Reliance. And Dhirubhai Ambani was at that time alive, and there was a very contentious matter. And I had decided that no, very great friends of mine said no, they must be disqualified on national security grounds or whatever. And I had gone through the matter and it decided that no. And I had written the whole thing in my own hand. So the secretary said, no sir, we must write this to the Prime Minister. Why? No sir, it is Reliance. People will say we have taken money. They may not say about you but about our officers. So I am not in the habit of writing to Prime Ministers. It's our responsibility. No, sir, but you have to do something. So after the cabinet meeting, I walked with him and I said, Atal ji, maaf kare, ye meri instinct ke bilkul barkhilaf hai. I don't want to mention it to you, magar wo secretary keh raha hai ki hum par allegation aayegi corruption ki, ye kyunki Reliance ka case hai. He stopped. He looked at me. He said, haan, ye to baat theek hai. Arey chodo. Jo karna karo. That confidence that an editor like you will give to his reporters, that confidence that every head of a team must give to others was certainly one of the great positive surprises. The negative surprise was not at that time, but later on when as Mr. Bajpayee sort of gave up active politics, things receded, and I found not just in BJP but all around now these charlatans taking over and exercising such authority.
Arun Shourie, we're almost at the end of this fascinating program, but to come back full circle to where this began, the book you just released. And finally, I would like, if possible, for you to just say something about the two rocks of your life, perhaps Adit and Anita, and two people who are both going through a great struggle. And you've written in the book that sometimes you're the servant-in-chief and you're the man. You dedicated the book to mothers, but you didn't talk about fathers. What is it like for you, and how do the three of you actually work together as a family?
Well, actually, I've not said that I'm sometimes their servant-in-chief. I am their servant-in-chief. And yes, we are all the time together, and I don't think we can imagine each of us without the other. Adit sleeps with us. He has to have a queen-sized bed because it's difficult for him to turn. Anita sleeps. I sleep on the floor by their feet. And they are my constant teachers. They are, that's the theme of the particular book also. They are our life. We are each other's lives. We didn't need the 45 minutes for which the tea lasted. Anita was dazzlingly beautiful. As we got into the car, I looked back to get another glimpse of her. My father started the car and my mother asked, Arun, पहले जनरल साहब नू मिले आइए घर चल के या घर चल के इन्हां नू फोन कर दईए कि भी साडी वालों तो yes है. I thought we had lost the prize of my life. Later she was to tell me, I told myself, if he looks back, I will say yes. Since that day, I always look back as I leave.